salvation, ascension, and unity. These are the three doctrines of the Order. But these three doctrines are the very thing that the Primus Fenrico so desperately drove towards. In the real world, religion and politics don't always mix well, because their goals and principles often conflict with each other. Where religion seeks salvation, politics seeks power. Where religion aims at unity, politics lives with diversity. And where religion refuses to compromise, politics depends on compromise. But what happens when the lines between the two are blurred? What happens when the two do mix? You get something like Raguna. And think of Raguna being the true representation of that. But how did the Order and Fenrico end up the way that they did? You can thank the Leviathan for that. At least, mostly. Let's start from the beginning. The Order of the Deep was established shortly after the First Dark Tide engulfed Raguna. The first Primus Napoli restored civilization from the ashes, and then went on to found the Order. To the people of Raguna, their history explains that shortly after the First Dark Tide, when Napoli died, on his deathbed he foretold a prophecy, said to have been given to him by the Sentinel. A prophecy which states in the distant future, a last wave shall engulf the earth. Those saved must breathe to ascend in unity on new land. Just as we once answered the Sentinel's call and made landfall on Renacida. The only thing is, Napoli was not the most reliable fortune teller for several reasons. But actually, this prophecy ended up being true. Back in 2.0, Riccia retells the journey of the first Primus Napoli. When the first dark tide ravaged Renacida, the first Primus followed the currents on a rickety boat and met the Sentinel in person. And that's where the Pilgrim Sail traditional originally came from. But it turns out that this was nothing but a lie, because during the 2.2 main story quest, Cantarella reveals that in his mind-torn state, Napoli had sought the aid of the Visalia family to basically put him out of his misery. He revealed that when he had journeyed through the first dark tide, when he reached the end, there was nothing. Through his constant battle with the dominion of his own mind with the Leviathan, Napoli had committed many crimes and atrocities against his own people. Through the constant worship of the Leviathan through the Order of the Deep, the adoration of the Blessed Maiden, as well as the overall faith of the entirety of Raguna, the Leviathan was able to feed and ultimately become stronger. Speaking of the Blessed Maiden, there was actually a period of time where she once led Raguna. Although it is not specified how long she ruled for, just based on how others who were around during this time speak of her, it's safe to say that the city was a lot lighter than the way we know it to be today. Remember Bardolino from the Fool's Troop? Well, he had once been crowned with the laurel, and was quickly banished by the Order. But he recounts that during the time he had won the laurel, Raguna was led by the Blessed Maiden. He explains that she promoted all sorts of grand celebrations during the Carnival, with music, dancing, food, and wine. A huge difference in comparison to Raguna under the reign of the Order. As you can imagine, the Order was not the biggest fans of the Blessed Maiden. In fact, they ended up placing her in literal prison for 3 days. And unfortunately, just as Cartathea was a pawn to the Leviathan, just as she was a pawn to the Order. So much so that she was more of a symbol used by the Order to further promote their faith. Cartathea was not the perfect idea of the Blessed Maiden. She wasn't completely complicit, and she believed freedom and joy are basic necessities of life. Ideology deemed dangerous to the Order. So when Cartathea did things like, have too much fun, the Order would swiftly punish her for it. With Cartathea's descent, Fenrico had his rise in power. Fenrico's devotion to the divinity, as well as his wisdom and determination, made him an ideal candidate for becoming the next Primus. And as we know, he was able to work his way through the ranks, from student to acolyte to priest and eventually Primus. The only thing is, Fenrico would often take the Order's codex too literal, which an acolyte even commented that he lacked spiritual insight and flexibility. So you can probably guess why Fenrico would hate someone like Cartathea, especially with how devoted he was to the cause. Cartathea, being the resonator of the Thenodian, was basically convenient for him to accept. And from this, he was able to seize control of Raguna. And when he did, let's just say he got to work very, very quickly. One thing about wuwa is that there's a lot of important lore that can be found in collectible quest items. One of my favorites is the former Privy Councillor's notes, which documents how drastically Raguna had changed in such a short amount of time under Fenrico's rule. The author documents that they stood with Fenrico watching the pilgrim sails depart from the harbour, and when they turned to him, his face was enshrouded with a strange shadow, potentially being the moment the Leviathan had set its sights on him, to use him as one of its many, many puppets. When we first arrived to Raguna, there are many NPCs who briefly mention the accident that happened at the Carnival a few years ago. The former Privy Councillor writes that the Carnival accelerated the shift in Raguna. It transformed from a place of hope and freedom to a place of despair and restriction. The pilgrim sales that were once seen as the highest honor were twisted into the highest dishonor. And in the 2.5 main story, we get to read notes left behind by Fenrico. Although he was unaware of the details, Fenrico was one of the only people to realize that the Sentinel was no longer what it once was. With the Sentinel practically gone, along with the Blessed Maiden, this was the chance Fenrico could take to guide Raguna to a brighter future. All he had to do was gain the trust of the city. By working with the likes of the Fractidus, Fenrico would foment a disaster in Raguna and swiftly swoop in to save the day by calling on the divinity in their time of need. That way, the people of Raguna would believe that he is truly the resonator of the Sentinel, but also no longer feel the need to question him or his authority. He had successfully achieved complete authority of Raguna, and that is how Fenrico solidified his spot as the Primus. But there was just one little problem, or I guess a big problem, because everything Fenrico does was influenced by the Leviathan. His main motivator was seizing and obtaining control, and yet control was something he had never truly had in the first place, which is why we end up in the situation we do where he goes Super Saiyan. Remember the Thenodian's gem? Everyone and their mother were after this gem, and the reason why was because said gem contained remnants of the Leviathan's power to merge and assimilate. And Fenrico wanted to use the gem to help him achieve his path of salvation for the people of Raguna, by basically merging all of their subconsciousnesses and housing them inside the gem. The only thing is, the gem is exactly what the Leviathan wants, and aims to use it and Fenrico to bring forth yet another dark tide. Fenrico was not only blinded by his inescapable corruption at the Leviathan, but he was blinded by his savior complex, and this unfortunately catapulted him into the Leviathan's trap. But I have a question I want you to think about. Is Fenrico a villain or a victim? Or is he both? Fenrico is a pretty complex character, and his actions can fit into either mold. Like Napoli, he had committed many atrocities against his people, despite him originally technically having inherently good intentions. The banishments of innocent people, censorship, manipulation, and tyranny, all of these crimes were committed by him. But how much of it can you argue was the result of the Leviathan's influence? Or do you think even without the Leviathan in the equation, that Raguna, Fenrico, and the Order would still end up in a similar scenario? Yes, he ended up sacrificing himself to fend off the Dark Tide, and ultimately achieved his goal of salvation for his people, but does that truly excuse him of his past? I am not so sure. And with that being said, I will leave it there for today. Please feel free to let me know in the comments your personal thoughts and theories on what we discussed. And as always, make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe if you haven't already. I will see you in the next one. Take care, bye!